Welcome to Giant Monster Week 4. Each day this week we're looking at a giant monster movie leading up to the release of 10 Cloverfield Lane at the end of the week. Today we're heading to Japan for a kaiju classic, Frankenstein Conquers the World, aka Frankenstein vs. Baragon. Before we talk about the film itself, the history of how this film was conceived is pretty interesting. The idea for the story came from an unused 1962 screenplay titled King Kong vs. Frankenstein, which was written by special effects technician and stop-motion master Willis O'Brien. O'Brien did the stop motion for the original 1933 King Kong film, and Ray Harryhausen also trained under him. This original script had Dr. Frankenstein create a giant monster from animal parts, which then fought King Kong. The script was eventually sold to Toho, the film studio behind Godzilla and many other kaiju films. Toho ended up making King Kong vs. Godzilla, this film, and its sequel, which we'll talk about tomorrow. Crazy how things work out. Frankenstein Conquers the World was actually the first ever Japan-US collaboration film, which is why there's an American actor in the lead, Nick Adams. There do exist two cuts of the film, one for each country, but both are very identical, the US cut only being about 3 minutes shorter. A third cut of the film exists, referred to as the international cut. That cut has an alternate ending that we'll discuss in a minute. On to the film. You have to know a little bit about world history to understand this film, but nothing you shouldn't already know. The film starts out in World War II. Dr. Frankenstein is in Germany and has created a beating heart that cannot die. The German army then takes this heart for their own control, away from the doctor. The heart is transported from Germany to Japan for safekeeping since the two countries were on the same side in the war. The military wants the heart studied so the soldiers can have this kind of heart, which would keep them alive during battles. While the heart is in Japan, this is when the atomic bombs are dropped on Japan, destroying tons of land, including where the heart was being kept. Flash forward 15 years, and a boy is found in Japan running around eating animals. He is captured by scientists who study him and come to find out he is growing in size constantly. It is found out that this boy is a grown mutation of the Frankenstein heart. The heart grew into a person from the radiation of the atomic bomb that was dropped on Japan. After a while, the Frankenstein monster breaks out and is on the run for the rest of the movie. While that is going on, the monster Baragon randomly shows up a couple of times. At first, the destruction for Baragon is blamed on the Frankenstein monster, and the scientists argue with the public if he should be killed or kept alive. At the end of the movie, Baragon and the Frankenstein monster finally cross paths and fight each other. In the alternate ending that I mentioned earlier, after their fight, a giant octopus shows up out of nowhere and there's a quick fight with it. Up until now, I had never seen this movie, but I've always heard of it. I really like the story of this film. The supernatural elements of a Frankenstein story combined with real history and a kaiju-type story blend very well together. Essence of the idea that this was partially to be a King Kong film still feel like they are here. The Frankenstein monster has some affection for a female scientist, which she returns as she cares for him. We the audience come to sympathize with the Frankenstein monster as none of this is his fault. The scientist's involvement with all this is interesting and never feels boring. I always think that's an important thing to do in these films. Have the human characters feel important and make sure their scenes aren't worthless. The middle of the movie when the Frankenstein monster is on the loose is where the film drags a little bit. The payoff is the monster fight at the end of the movie, which is a fun time. Sadly, they only fight this one time and it's the last 13 minutes of the film. The actor who played the Frankenstein monster, Koji Furuhata, does a very good job at being sympathetic and at being a monster. He doesn't have to wear a suit, so his battle at the end, he has great speed for a giant monster, flexibility to throw rocks, punch, and grapple his enemy. Baragon is a more traditional kaiju monster with the abilities to shoot blasts from his mouth and to dig underground. One thing I don't understand about Baragon and some other kaiju monsters I've seen in other films is why they don't walk on all four legs. Their back legs are always like bent and they just sort of drag them. Baragon does this and I've seen other giant monsters in other films do this. It's never because of an injury for story purposes, they just walk like that. Is there a reason that the monsters do this? Or does it have something to do with the actor inside the suit not being able to walk on all four legs? Either way, I've always found it to look weird. Going back to the Frankenstein monster, in this film, they call the monster either the monster or just Frankenstein in the sense that he came from Dr. Frankenstein. But by the halfway point, they refer to the monster simply as Frankenstein, putting this film in the long tradition of mistakenly calling the monster Frankenstein. Overall, this film is a great time. I really enjoyed how the story fits together with history, Frankenstein lore, and Toho style of movies. The movie isn't easy to find. You won't see it in a store anywhere most likely. It can be found on Amazon or eBay, but the price is high for a DVD, fetching anywhere between $30 to $80. I was lucky enough to buy my copy at G-Fest for a price on the lower end of that range. The DVD itself, released by Tokyo Shock, is a good release. It has all 3 cuts of the film and a good amount of bonus features including trailers, still images, and audio commentary and deleted scenes. If you have any interest in this film, giant monster movies, and classic kaiju films, I say try to get your hands on it.